There's a country made of over 17,000 islands, where more than 300 ethnic groups speak their own languages, and volcanoes are so active that entire villages farm directly on their slopes, using the same fertile soil that could one day destroy everything they've built. Ancient tribes here still live almost exactly as they did 5 centuries ago, separated by only a few hours from one of the most chaotic, densely packed megacities on the planet. Modern skyscrapers and centuries-old spiritual traditions exist on the very same street, often without either one noticing the other. This is Indonesia, a country that, on paper, simply shouldn't work the way it does.
To understand Indonesia, you first have to understand its scale. Stretched across more than 5,000 kilometers of ocean, it's the largest archipelago on Earth, wider than the entire continental United States from coast to coast. If you overlaid a map of Indonesia onto Europe, it would stretch from London all the way past Istanbul, crossing dozens of countries in between. Over 270 million people live here, making it the 4th most populated country in the world, right behind India, the United States, and China. And yet the vast majority of its 17,000 islands remain completely uninhabited, some so remote and so small that they've never even been formally named, let alone surveyed in detail. Satellite imagery still occasionally reveals landmasses that weren't previously documented on any official map. Tiny specks of land nobody has ever set foot on. What makes Indonesia genuinely strange isn't just its scale, it's the sheer diversity packed inside that scale. More than 700 distinct languages are spoken across the archipelago, some by communities numbering only a few thousand people, isolated for centuries by nothing more than open water and distance. A person born on one island might never fully understand the language, the customs, or even the daily rhythm of life of someone born just 200 kilometers away, on the other side of a strait they may never cross in their entire lifetime. This isn't a country in the way most nations think of themselves as countries. It's closer to hundreds of distinct worlds, loosely bound together by a shared flag, a shared government, and a shared history of independence from colonial rule, but very little else in daily life. Even the concept of time shifts from island to island, with 3 official time zones spanning the archipelago, a rarity most countries this size never have to deal with. Understanding Indonesia means accepting, right from the beginning, that there is no single Indonesian experience waiting to be discovered. There are thousands of them, existing all at once, scattered across a stretch of ocean wider than most of Europe, each shaped by its own geography, its own history of trade and migration, its own rhythm, its own beliefs, and its own version of what it actually means to belong here. And that's before we even get to the volcanoes that make so much of this possible in the first place.
This is a nation sitting directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire, home to more active volcanoes than almost anywhere else on the planet, over 130 of them still capable of erupting at any moment. Mount Merapi alone has erupted more than 80 times in recorded history, and yet farmers return to its slopes again and again, rebuilding homes in the exact same danger zones evacuated only years before. The reason is simple and almost impossible for outsiders to fully grasp. Volcanic soil, as dangerous as it is, produces some of the richest, most fertile land in Southeast Asia. Entire rice-growing economies exist in the shadow of active craters, because the same ash that can bury a village also replenishes the soil with minerals that ordinary farmland could never match. It's a trade-off most of the world would consider unthinkable, living beside something that could destroy everything. because it's also the reason anything grows at all. Further east, the island of Komodo holds a different kind of extreme entirely. This is the only place on Earth where the Komodo dragon exists in the wild, a predator that can grow past 3 meters long, strong enough to take down a full-sized water buffalo using venom-laced saliva that prevents blood from clotting. A hunting method refined over millions of years of isolated evolution. Local fishermen have coexisted with these animals for generations, treating them not as monsters, but as an accepted part of the landscape, dangerous, ancient, and permanent. Deeper into the rainforests of Sumatra and Borneo, the extremes shift from geological to biological. These islands shelter some of the last wild populations of orangutans on the planet, alongside Sumatran tigers and elephants found nowhere else on Earth. The forest canopy here is so dense and so poorly mapped that researchers still occasionally document species that had never been formally recorded before, hidden in plain sight for centuries. Indonesia's natural extremes aren't isolated exceptions scattered across a few remote islands. They're the baseline the entire country operates on. This is a nation where the ground itself seems to actively resist being tamed, where danger and abundance are never fully separate from one another, and where entire ways of life, from rice farming to fishing, to simply choosing where to build a home, have been shaped not despite that tension, but directly because of it. Head inland, away from the coasts, and Indonesia starts to feel like it belongs to a different century entirely. In the highlands of Sulawesi, the Toraja people still practice funeral rituals that can take years to complete. A body might remain at home, treated as merely sick rather than deceased, while the family saves for months or even years to afford a ceremony worthy of the person's status, involving elaborate processions, buffalo sacrifice, and burial sites carved directly into cliff faces, with wooden effigies of the dead watching over the valley below. Further west, on the island of Sumatra, the Mentawai people live almost entirely off the surrounding forest, using handmade blowguns tipped with poison for hunting and filing their teeth into sharp points as a traditional mark of beauty, a practice that predates any written record of the islands. Shamans here still perform healing rituals passed down orally across countless generations, with no written text to preserve or standardize them. These aren't performances staged for tourists passing through. They're living, ongoing ways of life, largely untouched by the pressures reshaping the rest of the country. What's remarkable isn't just that these traditions survived colonization, foreign occupation, and decades of rapid modernization pushing in from every direction. It's that many of these communities have no real interest in changing at all. Western-style development reached their doorstep decades ago, in the form of roads, missionaries, and government resettlement programs, and in many cases, it was simply, quietly declined. It raises an uncomfortable question for outsiders looking in from comfortable distances. Progress, exactly by whose definition, and at what cost to whom? Elsewhere, on the eastern edges of the archipelago, in places like Papua, hundreds of additional tribal groups remain even less documented, some having had only limited contact with the outside world within living memory. Anthropologists still debate how many distinct cultures exist across Indonesia's eastern islands, precisely because so many remain deliberately, or simply logistically, outside the reach of formal study. In a country this vast, tradition isn't a single thread running through history. It's thousands of separate threads, some barely touched by the outside world at all, still being woven exactly as they always have been. And yet, just a short flight away,
Indonesia looks nothing like this at all. Jakarta, the capital, is home to over 10 million people within the city itself, and its wider metropolitan area holds more than 30 million, making it one of the largest urban populations anywhere on Earth. Traffic here is so severe that the average commuter loses hundreds of hours a year simply sitting still in gridlock, watching motorbikes weave between stalled cars in a kind of organized chaos that somehow, mostly, works. The city itself is sinking, in some northern coastal areas, by as much as 25 centimeters a year, one of the fastest sinking rates of any major city in the world. Decades of unregulated groundwater extraction have left entire neighborhoods below sea level, protected only by aging sea walls that are already failing. The situation is serious enough that the Indonesian government has begun construction of an entirely new capital city called Nusantara, built essentially from scratch on the island of Borneo, a project expected to take decades and cost tens of billions of dollars. Inside Jakarta itself, the contrasts are impossible to ignore. Glass office towers rise directly beside street vendors selling the exact same food their families have sold for generations, cooked on the same type of cart, in the same spot, for decades. Luxury shopping malls sit just blocks away from dense neighborhoods with no reliable access to running water or consistent electricity. Motorbike taxis weave past luxury cars stuck in the same traffic, everyone equally trapped, regardless of what they can afford. This isn't a country smoothly transitioning from old to new, discarding one for the other in an orderly fashion. It's a country where both realities exist permanently, side by side, refusing to fully replace one another, refusing to resolve into something simpler. Street food vendors now accept payment through mobile apps developed by billion-dollar tech companies headquartered just kilometers away, blending centuries-old trades with infrastructure built only a few years ago. That tension, uncomfortable and unresolved as it is, might be the truest, most honest description of modern Indonesia there is. But these wild places, the volcanoes, the rainforests, the last strongholds of animals found nowhere else, are disappearing at one of the fastest rates of any country on Earth. Indonesia loses vast stretches of rainforest every single year, most of it cleared to make way for palm oil plantations, a resource hidden inside an enormous share of everyday products most people use without ever realizing it. From packaged food to shampoo to lipstick, sitting in bathrooms on the other side of the planet. The orangutans, tigers and elephants that call these forests home are being pushed into smaller and smaller fragments of habitat, sometimes isolated so completely from one another that entire populations can no longer interbreed. Conservationists warn that without significant intervention, some of these species could disappear from the wild within a single generation, not in some distant future, but within the lifetime of children being born in Indonesia right now. It's the same contradiction that seems to define everything else about this country, playing out on a global scale. Extraordinary natural richness, built on ground that's constantly shifting beneath it, whether from volcanic activity, economic pressure, or the simple, relentless demand of a growing global population that rarely stops to consider where its everyday products actually come from. Local communities that once depended on the forest for hunting, medicine and shelter now find themselves negotiating with plantation companies for access to land their families have used for centuries, often with little legal standing to push back. Indonesia isn't a place that makes sense when you try to explain it simply. 17,000 islands, over 700 languages, volcanoes and rice fields existing in the same breath, ancient tribes and sinking megacities held together somehow under a single flag and a single, relatively young, idea of nationhood. Every attempt to summarize it inevitably leaves something out, some island, some language, some way of life that contradicts whatever pattern you thought you'd just identified. And maybe that's exactly the point of a place like this. Some countries were never meant to be simple, tidy, or fully knowable from the outside, no matter how much time you spend looking. What Indonesia offers instead is something rarer, a living reminder that scale and diversity, real diversity, rarely resolve into anything as clean as a single story. It remains one of the most misunderstood nations on Earth, not because information about it is hard to find, but because no single narrative could ever really hold all of it at once. Perhaps the honest way to end this isn't with a conclusion at all, but with an admission. Everything covered here barely scratches the surface of 17,000 islands, and that, more than any single fact or figure, is the truest thing anyone can say about this country.